Welcome to another episode of apologus.wordpress.com book reviews. This is episode number 8, and in this episode I want to review briefly Bram Stoker's classic novel Dracula. Now, I began reading the book Dracula in book form, and then when I discovered that it was available for free download on Kindle, I went ahead and downloaded it and read the latter half of the book on a Kindle format, which was really terrific. Now, I confess it took me almost about 3 months to conclude this novel. I was reading several other novels and other books on the side, but something about Stoker's style and the way he narrated this great story through an infinite amount of journal entries, something about that particular style did not keep me glued to its pages. Nevertheless, I persevered and concluded this classic novel. Now, in summary, let me offer sort of a brief summary perspective on the book. In summary, the story begins with Jonathan Harker, and Jonathan is an English solicitor who travels to Transylvania to meet Count Dracula. And really, the crucial dimension of this book is not so much when Jonathan Harker arrives at Count Dracula's castle, but really what happens before that is that he greets and meets several sort of area residents who seem particularly frightened by the very mention of the name Dracula. In fact, as he is getting on his trip to Transylvania, one of the area residents gives him a crucifix, a way of protecting him from what is ahead. And of course, Jonathan's completely oblivious to what happens and really pays no attention to their fears or why, in fact, they are fearful. When Jonathan arrives at his last checkpoint, what happens is that a coach arrives to take him to Count Dracula's castle, but in fact the one who's riding the coach is actually in fact Count Dracula. And you see some of the descriptions that Bram Stoker has of Count Dracula as one who is a very strong man. Count Dracula is the one who guides him to the castle, and he's the one who receives him at the castle. And from there on, the way the story goes is that Jonathan's encounters with Dracula take on sort of entirely a different purpose than the one that he originally imagined. Of course, he went to Count Dracula's castle for business reasons, and he ends up later on confronting Count Dracula in sort of this very cosmic confrontation between good and evil. And the remaining of the story is truly a sort of a wealth, as I mentioned earlier sarcastically, a wealth of journal entries detailing the Count's activities and what others are planning to do to terminate this, quote, dead and undead creature named Count Dracula. So let me conclude by offering a few thoughts on this classic novel. And they come, of course, from a Christian perspective. The first thing I want to observe is that Dracula is a picture of tyranny. He wants to duplicate himself, like all tyrants want to duplicate themselves. They don't want to create an individual equally powerful, but they want to create image bearers who will reflect their agenda and who will sort of spread their evil schemes and evil agenda to other people. It is sort of an evangelistic enterprise that Dracula goes through here by sort of duplicating himself. And he is, in this sense, he's sort of a Satan-like figure because he gives and he takes blood as a sort of demonic covenant between he and his newly created disciples. This is sort of Dracula's great commission, so to speak. Secondly, while there may be evil, while there are those who truly seek to devour the righteous, so to speak, there will always be, as Dracula describes, there will always be a committed group who seek the good of the city, a group who's committed to the shalom of the city. They will be covenantally bound, and their goal and mission is essentially to see evil eradicated. And so, in one sense, they are protectors of the community. They are ordinary shepherds who will take on evil through the means provided to them. And so we see some of the religious dimensions of Count Dracula. You'll see sort of a lot of Anglo-Catholic themes in the book. You'll see crosses. You will see consecrated wafers. These are just sort of a few examples of items used to confront evil forces. And this means, at the very least, that these protectors acknowledge that you cannot fight evil with common tools. You need, in one sense, supernatural tools. You need spiritual tools to fight evil. Thirdly, there's a strong sense of protection in this novel also. Jonathan Harker desires to protect his wife from evil, and he is sort of devastated by the effects of evil on her, and he does not want her to become what they are, because the vampires, they are purposeless, and they are non-humans that are essentially roaming the night and the darkness forever and ever. Jonathan, in fact, he wants the opposite. He wants a life with meaning, a life with love, a life that Dracula cannot provide. And what propels him to carry on this quest is precisely this longing for meaning, this longing for normalcy in his own life. But for another point, fourthly, is that Dracula illustrates sort of another important principle. The book, that is, illustrates another important principle, and that's the principle of sacrifice. Throughout the book, towards the end especially, you'll see that in the desire to defeat evil, there will always be those who end up sacrificing their lives for the greater good, sacrificing their lives for the sake of others. And this happens also in this novel. And finally, one common theme that I think so clearly illustrates the evil versus good motif is the contrast between darkness and light. You see, evil works and roams the earth at night because it flourishes in the night, to put it simply. The darkness reflects the secrecy and the conspiratorial nature of evil. Whereas on the other hand, those who live in the light, of course, they have a conspiracy of their own, they have an agenda of their own, but this conspiracy is not secretive, it is not hidden. Their plans are not secretive, it's open up in the air, it's open to the light so the public can see, and they can see if they want to join in this particular endeavor and enterprise. Well, these are sort of a few thoughts on the book Dracula. Really a terrific book. And as a final note, I would not recommend any modern adaptations of Dracula. I would simply go directly to the original 1931 adaptation starring Bela Lugosi and watch that adaptation, which I think is really probably the greatest adaptation of Dracula in the last century. So read the book, read the novel, and watch the 1931 version if at all possible. And I hope you enjoyed this really great adventure called Dracula. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.